is the third consecutive Emmy win for Julia Louis-Dreyfus. Over her career, she's won 5 Emmys.
Hello, sir. My name's Paige. I'm a paramedic. What's going on today?
I fell down.
Do you remember how you fell?
I was on my way to make soup and I tripped on this rug again.
Do you remember if you hit your head or did you lose consciousness?
No, I remember falling down.
Are you hurting anywhere?
My hip hurts when I try to move it.
I'm just gonna feel down your back here and you tell me if any of this hurts, okay?
Okay.
You hurt here?
No.
Okay. How about here?
No.
Okay, I'm just gonna step over you, okay?
Yes.
Does it hurt when I'm squeezing your hips together right here?
No.
Can you wiggle your feet?
Yes.
Do you feel me touching you down here?
Yes.
Negative spinal assessment. Pedal pulses are intact.
Sir, do you think if we helped you, you could get up?
I think so.
I'm just gonna have you roll over. And we're gonna bring you straight on up, okay? 1, 2, 3. Good. Can we help you stand?
Okay.
All right, 1, 2, 3. How do you feel standing?
Fine.
Are you dizzy?
No, but my leg fell asleep.
Okay, let's help you over here to sit on the couch. Watch your step. Nice and easy. Straight down there. Sir, I'm going to go ahead and check your vital signs, okay?
Sure.
Let me have your arm here.
Sir, what is your name?
Paul Jones,
And your birthday?
March 31st, 1935.
Sir, are you allergic to anything?
No, not that I know of.
Heart rate's between 85 and 96. It's strong, but it's slightly irregular. Saturation's 86% on room air.
Sir, are you supposed to be on oxygen?
Yes.
Are you supposed to wear it all of the time?
Yes, I took it off last night to go make my soup.
What do you wear the oxygen for?
I have COPD.
Blood pressure is 180 over 106.
Sir, do you also have hypertension?
Yes, that too.
So you have a history of COPD, high blood pressure, any other medical issues?
Not that I know.
Blood sugar's 491.
Sir, are you also a diabetic?
Yeah, that too.
Have you been diagnosed with something called atrial fibrillation?
I don't know what that is.
Saturations come up to 96%. Breath sounds are clear and equal. And pupils are equal as well.
Sir, do you take any medications?
Those on the counter.
Do you take all of these or some of these?
Some I take in the morning and some I take in the evening.
Sir, were you able to take your medications last night or this morning?
No, I fell down. I was on the floor.
Were you on the floor all night?
Yes. I couldn't get up.
Sir, did you know the stove is left on?
Well, that explains why it's hot in here.
Oh, that's no good.
Sir, is it okay if I go ahead and pull up your shirt and check your chest and abdomen?
Sure.
Oh my. Got a lot of bruising here on your chest and belly. Has someone been abusing you?
No, I fall down.
How often do you fall down?
Oh, once or twice a day.
A day?
Every day?
Yes, I fall down, but I can usually get up, but my leg hurt so much I wasn't able to get up this time.
Sir, what hospital would you like to go to today?
Do I really have to go to a hospital?
Well, I have a few concerns. You fell and weren't able to get yourself up, And as a result, you weren't able to take your medications. And because you fell, the stove was left on, which is really dangerous. I'm worried that if I leave you here at home, you may fall again, and things could be worse.
Oh, I think I'll be all right.
Do you think you can stand up on your own?
I'll try. Could you reach my cane, please?
Sure.
I can't. My hip hurts too much.
Sir, that's another one of my concerns, is that you may have a serious hip injury, and we really need to take you to an emergency room to have that evaluated and taken care of.
All right.
Is there anybody that comes by to help you on a regular basis? Do you have anyone that checks on you regularly?
My daughter's supposed to come tomorrow.
Do you know what day of the week it is?
Monday?
Actually, it's Tuesday.
I think we better go to the emergency room and have you evaluated.
Okay.
So I informed the nurse about our patient's living condition. She said she'd tell the social worker, but I just don't feel like that's really enough. I'm genuinely concerned about that man and feel like he's really at risk. I just feel like whatever we observed and communicated is going to fall through the cracks.
Well, won't the social worker meet with the patient to discuss his living situation?
Yeah, that may occur, but my concern is that he may not perceive there's anything wrong with his living situation. He might indicate that his situation's fine and be discharged home without any kind of intervention. And of course, you and I observed the severity of the situation and the degree to which he really needs help.
Yeah, well, maybe we could talk with the social worker.
Well, we could if he or she was available, but gee, we got to get back in service. And I'm afraid that whatever I would tell the social worker is exactly what I told the nurse. You know, there's no official process for us to do that. It's just really frustrating because I'm afraid this man's going to go home and is likely going to get in the same situation and then call 911 for the same thing or something worse.
Yeah, and the chances that it'll be us responding back out to him are questionable.
Yeah, we'll never know if he really gets any help.
That's frustrating.
Totally bummer.
Hi, it's good to see everyone here. We're here to talk about the Connections program. A little bit about the history, how we got here, is that we know as EMS providers in our system that we see lots of patients who have not only medical problems, but they have significant social needs as well. Sometimes that's even more significant than their current medical problem for which we've been called for to attend to them. But we really haven't had a good way to give information to social workers so they can follow up with the patient. So we often take the patient to the ED, take care of them, we transfer care, but that information about what we see on the scene, things that we think are really problematic for that patient, evidence of some kind of social need, such as hunger or lack of social support, or abuse, or any of those types of things, we don't really have a good way to organize that information and make sure that that patient gets followed up with. So through working with all of you, we have come and developed a program which we're about to launch. And so we're going to talk about the Connections program. So that's what this was intended to do. We think we have a process in place that will work on that. So let's talk about the process of that.
So when a 911 call comes in and a unit is dispatched. The paramedic is at a perfect position to observe that person's living condition in addition to addressing the medical need that they're responding to. So once, where before perhaps there wasn't a conduit to provide a referral to address those social needs, now Connections is going to address that, that particular need. So when the paramedic identifies, let's say, food insecurity or inappropriate living conditions, medication management, things like that, then they have the opportunity to talk about those issues with their patient and place a referral. The referral will come to me, who I will then staff them with social work students who will be with us interning for a year. These students will utilize the pathways model, which we'll talk about briefly, and connect these folks to the appropriate services so that hopefully 911 won't be the system that they utilize to continue addressing those needs.
And Kurt, how cumbersome will it be for the medic in terms of additional paperwork or what we need to do to make this Connections happen?
Well, what we've done is we've created a online form that the crew, the EMS crew, can use from their Tough Book. They just click on the icon, they'll go to the website where they'll fill out the form. And once they filled out the information that's required, a little personal information from the patient, a description of what are the different factors or things that you'd seen that were of concern. For instance, the lack of food in the home, or the home is cluttered, there's some safety hazards, the medication issue, evidence that there's not enough support for what that person needs to really live on their own independently. Could be a number of things which we have listed. There's choices in our form. So you fill out the form, you do attempt to get a consent from the patient. We'll talk about consent a little bit later. And then once you completed the form, it's just one page, you submit it, and it will go to Ivette in her office. Ivette will review it and then assign it to one of the students. By the way, they are Masters of Social Work students.
Correct, they're graduate students.
So they're graduate students who will then work with your oversight with the client to see what kind of agency they can be.
Absolutely.
So did I answer your question?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, that's great. And I think paramedics like myself and my colleagues will be happy to know that it's part of our charting process, it's easy, but I think just knowing that they're helping somebody with some of those things will definitely be encouragement alone to make sure that
on the issue of consent, it's important to ask the patient if they're willing to have this follow-up by social workers. And so there's a signature part of the EPCR, just like our other signatures, that will be that consent. There's a brief thing you can read to them, or they can read it themselves in English and Spanish, and get them to sign if they are competent to sign a consent. If they're not, just advise the patient that we're going to be referring them. And if they say, no, I don't want it, then don't do it. But if they may not, if they're under 18 or they're, for some reason, they really are not can sign the consent legitimately, at least inform them of that. And there's places on the form that will tell you how to, where you can put that information. So let's talk about what happens after the referral comes to you. What do you do?
Once the referral is received by our office, it will be reviewed, and then it will be staffed and assigned to a student. That student will then make contact with that particular patient within 72 hours. So it doesn't matter whether it comes in on the weekend or not, it's going to be at the maximum 72 hours. Then the student will make either a home visit or an initial meeting with the patient to do a thorough assessment of what those needs are. And upon utilizing the Pathways program, upon completion of that, then the Pathways model takes place, where they will be following steps to address those needs that were identified during that session.
So can you tell us a little more about the Pathways model? What is that?
So I'm going to refer to Daryl, who is our program manager for Pathways.
Thank you. The Pathways model, it's currently in its 6th year of operations here in Bernalillo County. And the way it works is our office, I work with Ivette, administers a program that has 14 community partners out in Bernalillo County, many nonprofits, a faith-based organization, a couple non-traditional health clinics, and each of the organizations have at a minimum one community health worker that we call navigators, and they work directly with clients and help them connect to a whole variety of health and social services following a specific model called Pathways. It's a step-by-step model that the goal is to get the individual to the final step, because the final step translates into a healthy outcome. And so among the 14 organizations that we partner with out in the community, we have more than 20 navigators currently working under this Pathways model. And they'll be serving as mentors for the social work students who will be working with the referrals from the paramedics.
So the students would reach out to these navigators and try to figure out what's the best program for them to be, for the client to be connected to?
I think the students will learn all about the Pathways model, and if they run into situations where they're not sure what to do next, the navigators will be there to support them.
So in the instance of our Mr. Jones, all right, Mr. Jones had a host of problems. You assessed them, so you could,
Yes,
you can talk about what you found, but I'm wondering, based on what we saw, what agencies would you think would be appropriate in the current group of Pathways agencies? Would there be more than one agency that might be helping this gentleman?
Well, the way it works is all the agencies, all the navigators are trained equally. So we may try and find an organization that may offer some of the services that that gentleman would need, but all of the agencies are able to work with that individual.
Okay.
So if it didn't work out where one agency had space where they could work with this person, there are other ones to back them up.
So that once the patient agrees to be connected to one or more of these agencies and actually makes the visit, are we ever going to know what happened? How's the person with the referral going to know that their work and their effort is making a difference?
To say that a lot of times in EMS, we don't have any kind of closure. And, we do think about our patients beyond that call and wonder how they're doing. And in the video, Matt mentioned that sometimes we're called again, and we come to be familiar sometimes with these individuals who often call 911 for a variety of needs. So it would be nice to know that this individual really is getting help, and maybe a community service is coming into that man's home and helping him to remove some of those environmental issues or help him to have a more stable kind of situation.
So we do recognize the importance of paramedics who are in your position, who do go back to visit these folks, and the frustration of perhaps what else can be done. So we have built in a feedback component to connections, to where we will connect with the referral source within 10 days of making first contact with the patient. So we can let you know. Now, the patient that you referred, Mr. Jones, is now connected to the following agencies.
And we're not going to get to know exactly what they're working on necessarily.
Not
because
necessarily.
that's private information between the
Correct.
counselor and the social work agency and the client, but we at least know that they're hooked up to XYZ
Exactly.
agency. Okay.
Well, I even think as a paramedic and a social worker, it's good for our well-being to know that we've made a difference by thinking of this program Connections, making that referral, and that, yes, this person is really getting some help that they need.
What if you're unable to get in touch with the person? That the address we give you is not the right address, or they don't have a phone number, and when you went to the home, there was no one there. What happens? How many times do you try?
We'll
and what would
continue
you
to
tell
try.
us?
And at the point where we have exhausted all possible ways of reaching out to this person, we'll let you know we cannot reach them. Now, if we'll continue. If you get called back to that residence, for example, you can let us know, and we'll continue to follow up until we get a hold of that person.
What if someone's homeless and we see them on the street, they give us an address and it's one of the shelters? How are you gonna track them down in that instance?
We can get creative on reaching out to folks. And folks, if they want a particular service, they'll also be receptive to receiving it. Of course, we can't force folks that are not wanting a particular service. So, but homelessness is not going to be necessarily a barrier. One of the Pathways agencies that we contract with is Albuquerque Healthcare for the Homeless.
Right. So they have tremendous outreach capability.
Absolutely.
In terms of finding someone who we've made this referral on. So I wanted to give you the paper version of our form, because in case our computers are down, you need something. So we'll have paper backup, including the consent form. So we'll have paper back out. Nice color for the form. So on the one side is the form, and that's how simple it is. And then let me hand this out. And then on the other side are the criteria for making a referral. And that's important because that is built into the form as a pick list. And in the paper form, you just check it.
Sometimes we walk in, some of these are very obvious.
Yes.
Just when you look around. But some of the things that maybe are not so obvious that a paramedic can be assessing is when we find people who maybe are displaying some mental health problems, but they're not getting help with that, or maybe they're not getting their meds, or maybe a medical problem that they don't have primary care. So some of those things are require a little more in-depth in terms of paying attention on our part as medics.
So mental health problems is one of the things that we would be talking about. A lot of our patients have mental health problems, but they're being managed. So in the case where a patient's not being managed properly, either they don't have access to their meds, or they're not taking their medications, or they're not working, or they're having complications with the medications, that's the type of situation you would write up. Another one is not having transportation. That's not something you would normally think about to ask a patient. But if you ask them, when's the last time you saw your doctor? They say, well, I missed my appointment last month because I didn't have a ride. And I have one for this month, but I haven't figured out how I'm gonna go. Those are the types of things that you get into, which you normally wouldn't, you might ask, but now when you have this focused assessment related to their support issues, it'd be more appropriate. So transportation's another issue. Food insecurity, lack of food in the house. What's their plan for the next meal or the next few meals, and when are they gonna get more food in the house? Those are the types of things you'd be looking at. And Paige, in this scenario, you saw a pretty empty cupboard.
Yeah, it was obvious this gentleman had some issues with just managing his home environment. He mentioned he thought he tripped on a rug. No one was coming by to assess or help him regularly, like a family member. And then, when I looked in the kitchen, it was, quite sad. There wasn't adequate food for him.
Right. So you mentioned another one of the criteria is safety hazards. He tripped on a rug. Then the stove was on all night long because he didn't get to it, but he really wasn't aware that it was on either. And so that's a kind of safety hazard we're talking about. Environmental issues is similar to safety hazards, but there could be something else in the home where there's no heat or no way to cool the house in the summer. Issues like social supports. You got into it related to his daughter, who was supposed to be coming the next day, but he wasn't even on top of which day it was.
Right.
And so we're not really sure when she was supposed to be coming, and he certainly needed some support, and we don't really know what his daughter does for him.
Right.
So those are the types of things we're talking about in terms of social support. Inadequate housing, I mean, this wasn't the best place. I'm not sure it was inadequate, but it certainly needed some, there needed to be some improvements in his situation, so.
Yeah, I mean, there was lots of food that was old laying around. You start thinking about insects or problems like that. Just more difficult for him to manage with what was going on.
How about health management issues? That's another one, and I think you got into it in terms of getting his history.
Yeah, and just the difficulty, him really being aware of what some of his medical conditions were, and then the, amassed amount of medications I saw there that you wonder, is he really able to manage, or are those old, or could they be contraindicated to take together? Those kinds of things really create
And they weren't
concern.
organized in any way that could easily take them.
Mhm.
It was like a big pile of medications,
Right.
essentially.
And we often sometimes, find people that, yes, they're on oxygen and all of that is there, and there's a lot of smoking going on, and maybe they're not really aware of the danger in those instances.
So we've touched on a lot of the issues just briefly in describing what are some of the factors, and that's exactly what we're talking about writing up. And you see those things that you see as missing in his environment or his activities of daily living that really seem to be impacting his health, or there he needs some support. That's what we're trying to
Well, and it's nice
have
to
you write
know
up.
the social work student will then come and do a more in-depth assessment.
Absolutely.
We're gonna see what we can, observe things and document what we can, but of course that individual will really do a more thorough
Yes.
assessment.
The risk assessment will take up anywhere from an hour to an hour and a half, and that will occur during the first visit with the patient.
And all of these criteria really tie back to what we know as of the determinants of health: the social and economic environment, the physical environment, and the person's individual characteristics and behavior. We know that those are the major things that are influencing health.
Why do you suppose, I know a lot of my colleagues, we become frustrated when we know that the person may not really have a medical issue, but then they call 911, and they might call 911 repeatedly, and that causes some frustration for us. We're trained to intervene for emergencies. So maybe you can shed some light on why people, utilize 911.
Well, I think we know that the healthcare system is not accessible for people in many ways. And I don't think we're always thinking about the barriers in people's lives to the system that was really designed based on providing care for people who are sick. It's not designed to help keep people healthy. It's not really addressing what we know as those social determinants of health. And I think you would recognize this in your patients, that they may not have the money to pay for services. They may not have transportation to get to services that might be available. Services that are available may not be operating within hours that are accessible with their work schedule, or running kids around, trying to take the bus to take care of basic needs. It's hard to get to places where you can receive health care. We know there's a workforce issue, right, especially with primary care physicians. So it's really difficult to even get in to see somebody, and especially through our federal qualified health centers, where you would have a sliding scale. And a lot of our medical services are not culturally relevant for the communities that live here, and you also find low quality of healthcare. So maybe people have had experiences in the past and they found it to not really be of a high quality, so they don't even want to bother going back, But so there's a lot of barriers to accessing the healthcare system. We really haven't invested in prevention, and so it's not set up to really help keep people healthy.
So based on what you're saying, Leigh, people that call 911, there really is some underlying determinant versus just people being manipulative or lazy, or some of those unfortunate assumptions that are made about people, that there really are some determinants underlying that reason for that call.
Absolutely. I think we really need to learn to look through the lens of the people that we're serving and see that it's not a manipulation. It's some people have gotten good at making a system work for them that wasn't really designed to work for them, right? Because they may not be the highest paying customer, So they're making it work with the best they can while they're balancing these basic needs in their lives, like housing and transportation, security, taking care of your kids. We know a lot of people are taking care of other people who have chronic illness, and so there's a lot of issues that come with that. People's lives are really complex, and they're really doing the best they can, especially with a system that was not designed to really meet everyone's needs.
I was just reminded of kind of a premise of social work that would agree with, you know, we're trained to start where people are at. And even in EMS, we can adopt that kind of ideology, to start where they're at and just to go forward and try to help connect them.
Yeah, there's a lot of barriers, but there's a tremendous amount of assets that people bring to the table too, and this really gives us an opportunity to go into their lives and build on what's working well and the really positive things in their life and their strengths, because we all have a lot of those. It's just that we, as healthcare is transitioning into one that hopefully will focus more on population health and community health and supporting people in this way, we have to come up with, strategies like this that help to fill some of the gaps and address issues that healthcare hasn't traditionally been focused on.
So I was thinking about Mr. Jones, our scenario, and what may have been leading up to this problem. He's obviously have a number of health issues. He's not particularly managing that well. The only support that we know that he has is his daughter, who comes perhaps as often as she can, but we don't know anything about his daughter's life. And his daughter may be facing all sorts of challenges herself and is doing the best she can to support her dad, but that's not enough. And things may have gotten worse for him. So I think that it gets more difficult. We don't necessarily see some of the other things. We know that there's an issue with his daughter coming enough, but we don't know what she's facing. She may have, like you're saying, all those other issues, transportation issues, childcare issues, work issues, her own health issues, because she's trying to take care of an elderly father, but she may have her own set of problems. So I think that all those things, we were giving an opportunity now to sort of get into that and try to find what those things are. The good news is this whole thing doesn't rely just on what we see. That's where the social work students and Ivette, your supervision of them comes in to do that thorough assessment, so you really can figure out what the right thing is. We're not social workers. We can just document what we see and what we observe and what we find out from the patient, but we're not able to do that kind of diagnostic work to figure out what's really going on with this individual. But this partnership that we have really allows us to sort of do an initial, we see the person in their environment, we see what the needs are, and then we can hand it off to professionals who can then carry it on from there. So it's a warm handoff. It's not just putting a piece of paper out there somewhere that someone may never look at. It's that relationship we've built here with this Connections program.
Well, especially when you're being discharged from the hospital, you're getting a lot of information all at once, and maybe you still don't feel very well. So I think having that warm handoff is key to recognizing some of the pieces of the system that aren't working well, and we know that you don't always remember what you were told, and maybe not keep track of what you were given when you were discharged. So there's been a lot of work done analyzing what makes us healthy compared to what we actually spend on being healthy in the U.S. And what we know is that 50% of what makes us healthy are related to healthy behaviors. And those are influenced by many things like the built environment and just where we live, our zip code. The environment, about 20%, genetics, another 20%, and access to healthcare, only about 10% of what influences our health. And when you compare that to what we spend as a nation on being healthy, which is actually about 17% of our gross domestic product, which is way higher than any other country in the world. 88% of what we spend is on medical services. Healthy behaviors, about 4%, and then there's some other things we spend it on, another 8%. But so the vast majority of what we spend our money on is healthcare, when we know that's not really what's influencing health.
How do you see this changing that? Sort of that mismatch between where we spend our money and where actually the difference would make for people's long-term health?
You're beginning to recognize that healthcare plays a role in connecting people to these services, and maybe how we have it set up now isn't enough. the discharge planners and the care coordinators and the social workers, maybe it's just not enough the way we have it now, but that there's opportunity for paramedics who are in people's homes and in their workplaces and on street corners to identify things that other people won't see and to really act upon that and ensure that there's a follow-up through this system.
I think too, just even as a social worker, some of these organizations that Daryl mentioned with Pathways, I would think that some of their goals would to help educate patients and empower them and sort of teach them to become their own navigator. And so that, yes, their lifestyle is gradually changing when they start to learn about what constitutes a safe environment or what constitutes good nutrition or a system of how to manage all your medications, pill boxes, things like that, that some of us just take for granted because we learned those along the way in our lives. But some of these agencies might help people, just empowering, educating them about how does one sort of foster a healthy existence.
And learn what are your rights in healthcare
Yes.
and how to be an advocate for yourself and your family members. A lot of these systems are difficult to navigate and maybe, require just some additional skills and support to get through them and to ask for what you need.
Right.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's an important function of the navigators is to teach people while they're working with them so that they can eventually decrease their dependence. And one of the nice things about this program is what we've learned is many of the people that have participated in Pathways and then moved on, we've learned that they have helped others from what they learned while participating in Pathways. So it's kind of that, what do you call it, the extended family effect or something like that.
And I think, Kurt, to go back to your question, I don't think this program is going to fix everything. I think it's a really great step, and I think it's a part of what's happening with the larger picture with the Affordable Care Act and how there are now more incentives and penalties for not keeping your population healthy. And so I think it's a piece, but we still need to continue to recognize where we're lacking and investing in housing and advocating for livable wages and different things that we do know are going to have that long-term impact on people's health.
So, Kurt, I'm curious how down the road, say a year from now, how you'll evaluate how the process has worked, how his connections done, has it helped people or not?
Well, one of the things, based on the Pathways model, that's one of the measures is that that the patient or the client actually engages with the program that they've been connected to, and that they achieve some of the outcomes that that program is committed to working with them to achieve. So that'll be part of the information that we will be looking at. Ivette students are working on an evaluation model that we will use to see, we get the results that we want. This will all be in a database, so we can look at the database to see what are the different types of problems, or what's the preponderance of one particular problem versus another, or is it well distributed through all the different criteria. So there'll be a number of ways for us to look at that data. The nice thing is that we're working with a program at UNM that has already existing a way to capture that data, partially from what we give to the program, as well as to what the social work students are able to find in their assessment. And then the follow-through, the measuring of the follow-through, so that we're in a system that's already built to have those measures, so we can ask and get answers to how's the program working, what's our percentage of patients that actually enter into a program with an agency. And with those types of questions, we will be able to answer and then give that information back to the crews.
Do you see this as a trend, or perhaps where in other cities or other places where this model of kind of EMS teaming up with social work agencies, where it's worked?
Well, I know it worked in Syracuse back years ago in Syracuse. This is in the early 90s. We developed a program very much like this. It didn't have the same kind of support with the social work, agency that we have here. It had a different kind of agency that did that follow through, but it was quite successful. I know currently in San Diego there's a similar model, and in Boise, Idaho, there's a model similar to this. And I don't know, Ivette, if you know some other places?
I do. I know there's one in Ontario in Canada, as well as somewhere in Arizona. I forget the city.
Was that the Mesa program?
Possibly.
Right.
All of them have different infrastructure, but they target the same population and address the same issues, and every single one of them has been very successful.
I think it probably needs to be said that this program is it's a voluntary program with all of the agencies. So we have UNM, we have the Highland University, New Mexico State are all involved in this program, and Albuquerque Ambulance. Our fire departments are participating, so it's a collaboration. There's little money being spent because we don't have any money to spend, but we're working using sort of our interest in helping in this area and using the existing infrastructure in the community to make this happen. So it's all about pulling together resources that already exist. It'd be nice to have a funding stream for this for sure, but we don't. And so we're doing the best of what we can do.
And is it safe to say that this aligns with the community paramedic movement in the
It absolutely
country?
does. Yeah, glad you asked that question. I mean, part of community paramedic is to fill gaps, and also to play a role in sort of the community health, not just emergency health care. It's more getting to or trying to fill the gaps in their overall health of the community and of the individuals. So a lot of the training for community paramedics, at least some of the curriculum that are out there, involves some of what we were talking about today, looking at the social determinants of health, being able to identify them. And so that's what we're talking about. That's what this video is about. So what we're doing, I would think would be a great, in this video, would be a great part of any community paramedic program as an intro to the issues of social determinants of health and how to identify problems in the community.
I think it's important to note too that the whole Pathways program in Bernalillo County was basically built from community participation, and it was the community that decided that our model in particular should focus on the social determinants of health as opposed to being another medical model that focuses strictly on health care. So in the Pathways program, many of the pathways that the individuals and the navigators work on are things like housing, employment, adult education, domestic violence, food security, behavioral health, transportation, vision and hearing, and on and on. We have a total of 21 different pathways, each with 6 or 7 steps, all that have a healthy outcome when they reach the final step. So this program was built by the community and specific to social determinants of health because the community recognized that's what's really needed.
One thing we probably should talk about is what happens if you see a patient that is being abused and they're having an immediate emergent safety issue.
Right.
This program is not meant for that patient.
No, definitely not. I mean, that requires us to have more immediate intervention through either Child Protective Services or Adult Protective Services and law enforcement. So no, it would be a different kind of referral in that case.
And really what we do already in that case.
Correct,
So that's
absolutely.
it hasn't changed because of this program. Those patients in an emergent situation,
Right.
immediate threat, we follow the procedure we've been using for a long time in that regard.
I mean, I think some situations, in our video with Mr. Jones, my colleague Matt King was assessing for some of the bruising and asked him, is someone hurting you? And I could see a situation where maybe we make a referral to both Adult Protective Services and Connections, and then knowing that the social worker that comes is going to sort through that. Adult Protective Services would likely make a visit to that individual, but perhaps there was not any, abuse happening. But it wouldn't stop somebody from
Right.
not making the Connections referral if the person was wanting to give consent and you saw more of these other issues.
Correct. You had so many other issues going on. There may have been an abuse, maybe not, but there was so much else going on.
And I
It was
think
still worth
even with
referral.
Mr. Jones, the social work student, Ivette, probably would kind of be looking at, is this an issue of neglect?
Correct.
I mean, is there somebody who maybe is, keeping his Social Security check and he's not benefiting from that? I don't know. Those are more complex situations for the social worker.
And the student will be looking into each domain, each criteria to further evaluate if this is indeed a problem that we need to start addressing. It may fit into pathways or it may not, like abuse and neglect. So, and if that is the case, we will take the appropriate protocol to follow.
So what, is it possible, or can you envisage a situation where a crew makes a referral and after the assessment, it's determined that there's not a need to connect the patient or the client to an agency? Is that possible, and then what would happen?
That is possible. Perhaps the patient is already connected, but the services are not sufficient or follow through is not happening, and perhaps there's a disconnect in communication. So we'll facilitate that communication. We'll work with the patient on self-efficacy and self-advocacy, and communicate with the agency that they were initially working with, and somehow there was a disconnect.
Well, actually, that's one of the questions we ask on the form. The question says, are there social support agencies or individuals already involved with this person?
Right.
And that, in fact, it could be the case, and just for some reason they've fallen through the cracks, and it's simply reconnecting them. So that's one of the things we're assessing for, is one of the questions that we need to answer, and to ask and answer.
Reconnecting them, or possibly finding alternative places for them. Maybe their experience with the particular agencies they've been working with hasn't been very positive, and as a result, they stopped following up with them.
Right. Is there anything we haven't addressed in our discussion, Paige, that you think that we should talk about?
No, I think a critical piece will be for some feedback for paramedics and just have some closure, and just as they test it out and decide to make that referral, and then have something that comes back to them that, hey, yes, Mr. Jones is now was eligible for Medicaid, for example. He now can get some community home health aides that come to his home 3 times a week to help him manage his home life. I mean, things like that would be, just remarkable, knowing that he was connected and his situation has improved. I think most of my colleagues, we got into EMS because we want to help, and so I think they will embrace the program.
Now, it is important to say that this isn't the answer to all problems, like you said. It is a way for us to contribute to some solutions for people. And really, I think the concept of connections is really sort of the fundamental thing, is that people are isolated many times and do not have the right relationship or the right resources to help them through their lives. And that's what we're helping them do, is take advantage of resources that do exist in the community. They just have not known how to access them. And so that's really what it does. It doesn't solve the fact that they're poor, or it doesn't solve the problem of they have poor health or they don't have the social supports at home, but we can work with those resources in the community to try to build that up. So.
Definitely. After all, we're all connected and we're all in this together. So, yeah, I think my colleagues will really be interested in this program and really embrace it. Is there anybody that comes by to help you on a regular basis? Do you have anyone that checks on you regularly?
My daughter's supposed to come tomorrow.
Do you know what day of the week it is?
Monday?
Actually, it's Tuesday.
I think we better go to the emergency room and have you evaluated.
Okay.
So, Mr. Jones, I've noticed there's a few other things that you could use some help on. I'd like to refer you to our Connections program to get some help.
Well, what do you mean I need help?
Well, I notice around here, besides you falling, that things are pretty cluttered and you might need some help keeping things cleaned up. And I notice you don't really have adequate good food here. Your daughter's busy and not able to come every day to help you out, and this program could help you get someone coming out to help you with some of these things.
You're probably right. I hate to burden my daughter. She's very busy. And as you get older, you have fewer friends who can come around to help.
Well, sir, I can certainly understand that. I have a brochure here to show you, but also I'd need for you to sign a consent to give permission for me to give your name and information to the program. Would you like me to read it to you?
No, that's okay. I can still see. Can I have my glasses?
So what was this Connections program you were talking with Paul about?
Yeah, Connections is this new program where we can refer people who have social issues or challenges directly to somebody who can help arrange those services for them.
That's interesting. I mean, before all we could do was pass on our concerns to the nurse or the social worker in the hopes that the patient would get some of those services that we felt they needed. We really didn't know if anything was going to get done.
Oh yeah, now it's really great because all I have to do is fill out a form. The form goes directly to a social services liaison who makes an appointment with the patient, comes out and assesses their social situation. They can help them with any unmet needs they may have, such as inadequate food or environmental problems, safety hazards, or if they don't have access to medical care. They could even help someone organize their medications better. It's really great.
That's fantastic. Do you think you could show me how to fill out one of these Connections forms?
Absolutely. It's right here. Check it out.